about Wi-Fi, and he probably does, right? But I, as the network designer, need to make sure that my wired infrastructure is capable of supporting that Wi-Fi network, okay? So without further ado, what is a campus? Another thing about me, I don't like reading slides to people. Uh, you will notice as the slides go through that they have these like garish, like really loud yellow highlighters. I did that on purpose, okay? I'm gonna try and like highlight things. I'm gonna tell you the most important thing I want you to remember, and then you can read the slides later. Everybody can read slides, right? Anybody not able to read slides? I don't want to assume anything these days. Okay. So we use the word campus. It means buildings, right? It could be one building, maybe you live in the city and it's a skyscraper, right? But it could also be many buildings grouped together. And the other key thing in that definition is people and their belongings, right? So it's you, me, everybody, right? But it's not that UCS server in the data center, right? It's not the application. It's you and me coming to Cisco Live or going into the office, my phone, my laptop, those kind of things, right? So everything, and there's of course many, many technologies. The thing at the bottom, we could talk about quality of service, we could talk about multicast, security, but it's always from the perspective of the user. That's the reason the reason I added this slide. If you think this way, and you think of the word campus, it should become obvious why it's different than things like data center or service provider. So campus is really about geography, space, distance, right? Again, it could be just one building that has multiple floors, or it could be multiple buildings spread across the whole area. Depending on different regions, as in like different areas in the United States, different places in Europe, you may have a metropolitan area, a MAN. But the idea is that my company and all the people that work at the company, people, are spread around this city, and I connect them with very long distance fiber. Sometimes they're connected with copper in the office, again, Wi-Fi and those kind of things. So when you hear campus, I want you to think of geography. And then building on that, no pun intended saying the word building, how is the physical infrastructure inside of the building, okay? This cannot be understated. And I have a counter slide to this in just a moment. I talk about the walls. Even this conference, or the conference center, is more than a decade old. So when the building's first being constructed, they run the cables, right? And it's in the walls, it's in the ceiling. This is happening in your office. This is happening where you're working. And the problem is that cable is 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old cable. And they didn't know what 10 gigabit Ethernet was or 100 gigabit Ethernet when they did that. And it's very, very expensive, okay? So the boss is gonna ask you, hey, can you give us more bandwidth, but you gotta use the cable that's already in the wall, okay? So that's gonna come down to, again, like what box am I choosing? What optics am I choosing? And these kind of decisions. But again, the thing I want you to think about is the physical infrastructure, the physical building and the geography that's unique to campus. And campus is not data center. Okay, say it with me. Campus is not data center. Anybody in here like come from a data center background? And I don't mean it in any bad shaming way. It's just that it's a different sort of mindset, right? Data center, typically it's the center of data, right? So the objective there is to get everything into one place, very high speed cables, tons of electrical and cooling, tends to be one building, maybe two, right? Tends to be a single floor. It's very unusual to have data centers that are multiple floors. And I chose this picture because of that beautiful cabling, okay? This building, this data center was probably built less than 5 years ago, right? And they paid an absolute ton of money to put this data center together. That's not what happens in campus. Who has this network? Okay, okay. Um, you know, particularly through the ceiling. That's always my favorite, where it like runs over the lights, and you're like, what about electrical magnetic interference? I don't know what that is. Um, the little compact switch, if you're familiar with it, on the far right, that's actually inside of a pillar. So like things that hold up the walls, and they just stick a little switch in there and plug some stuff in. I hope it works for the next 10 years. Okay. Hopefully by this point you kind of get it. Now, I'll be using this sort of representation again and again. I hope everyone has seen the topology diagram. In fact, I should have said this in the beginning. The whole deck is about topology diagrams, okay? But what I want to draw attention to, and I used colors to kind of demonstrate this, is different protocols. Why do you use that protocol in that area? And multiple layers, right? Back to the little agenda. It's like, why do you have a two-tier network? Why do you have a three-tier network? And those kind of things. So everyone's heard of the three basic roles: core, distribution, and access. And there's a slide for each one of these, so I'm not gonna like kill it all in this slide. But this is your basic three-tier network, right? And traditionally, I use the colors, red for like the local area network or interior gateway protocol, L3 routed. And then blue is typically like a layer 2 switched area, okay? Well, it's about size, it's about scale. So this may be a normal core distribution access, may be like one building, or maybe it's a group of buildings, but it's not the entire campus area. So now I have different sites, different locations, and I need to connect those together, right? So you'll hear words like interconnect. Sometimes it's a data center interconnect, core interconnect. The word I want you to remember is interconnect, and its job is to connect those other core distribution access. Another one there, the reason I chose green is edge. So if anybody comes from an MPLS background, you'll have heard the word provider edge. So it's the edge of the provider, but it's more about edge. Whatever that thingy over there is, maybe I am connecting to the data center, maybe I am connecting to the service provider, but this box needs to be able to speak things like multi-protocol BGP and MPLS and these things, right? You'll also notice in the drawing, if you know the icons, I should say, and at least my clicker works for a pointer, there's a little doohickey hanging off to the side of this core edge, and that's the symbol for a wireless LAN controller. Okay, so it's very common to centralize your wireless, particularly the control element, somewhere in your network, so hanging off of the core. And when we get to that last little bit I was telling you about at the end, I'll make a point about that. So that is generic way is 4 basic tiers. You can keep going to a 5th tier. Anybody have a 4-tier or 5-tier network? Responsible for, okay, a couple in the back. There's even enterprises, they call themselves service providers. It's in the very large companies, they have an IT department, and they're basically service providers for the company. Right? Like, this department's over here in this city, and this other department's over here in this city. My job is to connect these, And it's still, one other point, it's still like a campus environment. It's a metropolitan area. They haven't yet gone on to wide area networking. I should have said this in the start.